Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me here today for SoulAdvisor's Global Collective. And it's pretty exciting to have you all in the same room or all in the same square with me. And I'm really excited to hear what transpires from this conversation. So just by way of background, we at SoulAdvisor have several hundred therapists with us now, or practitioners, of whom only 10% are men. And this has been a constant question for me in my yoga practice. It's usually more like 2% in yoga practice, but in many professions that we represent on SoulAdvisor, of which there's 120, there's a very low representation by men. So thanks all to agreeing to come aboard and explore that particular topic. We've got some beautiful men with us here. We have George Dellas, who you can see. If you'd like to wave, George, I think everybody can see your name, but just in case.
Hi, everyone.
So George is joining us from way down in Melbourne and is a very new practitioner on our system. We've just put up his listing on our system last week. George has an incredible number of modalities, and rather than me botch it up, I'd love, George, just for you to rattle off a few of the modalities that you work with. I know that these days you're coming, you've brought them all down to flame tree.
Flame tree.
But yeah. So perhaps you could tell us a few more of the modalities that you're working with and how they relate to flame tree.
Yeah, well, I started off studying as a naturopath and then brought on massage and remedial massage. And then after naturopathy, I moved in and I did a degree in health promotion at Deakin University. And then after the degree there, I went off and did a degree in China. Well, actually, I started off with a master's degree in acupuncture and then finished off my undergraduate degree in acupuncture. And then as you start accumulating different modalities and practices, and I added Reiki to it. And then flame tree is a system in itself, which incorporates all of those other systems. So then flame tree became a way for me to be able to identify what was priority for my clients and then bring in the appropriate technique or the appropriate modality to start helping them bring balance back into their life.
Thank you. My goodness gracious.
It's been a journey.
Yeah, a long run. Since 1985, I think you said, isn't it?
Yeah, 85 I started.
A good number of years. Yes. And I'm just going to introduce Richmond and Michael, and then I'm going to ask Marc to open for us. So that's the way that we're going to roll here. So Richmond, you and I have been talking for a while, and perhaps amongst us, you're the oldest, not the oldest person, but the oldest practitioner on our platform, or you've been a practitioner on our platform for the longest. That's how I should say it. So Richmond runs TRE Australia, which is, I better let you spell out that acronym for us and tell people a little bit about what that is, if you could.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. So yeah, the TRE, tension and trauma release exercises, it's basically deliberately invoking spontaneous involuntary movement, often shakes and tremors, but they can be full body movements and stretches. So I introduced TRE to Australia about 10 or 11 years ago. I didn't develop it. I was part of a global movement, which is really about empowering people through using their body's own spontaneous movement response as a self-care technique. And it's really a self-care technique for the times with COVID and everything else that's going on, being able to empower people as much as we can in their own health and well-being.
Fantastic. Yeah, and I don't know if any of our listeners have done it before, but it's the most phenomenal technique. I think it's amazing. So yeah, worth exploring. And Richmond's also just told me that last year you convened the Menergy men's gathering online, but before that you've been the convener down in Victoria of that organisation. Is that right?
Yeah, I look close. So I was part of one of the founding members of the Menergy Men's Gathering in Victoria, which is an annual event pre-COVID. About 200 or so men that gather for 3 or 4 days. It's quite a beautiful space. But last year, partly inspired because of COVID, we started what's called the Online Men's Gathering, or the OMG. So that was the first year we ran that. Similar, trying to recreate as much as we can online that opportunity to connect men with themselves, with each other, and with the earth. So yeah, we started that last year. We're just in the early planning stages for next year's 2022 OMG.
So it must have been very intuitive of me to ask you of all the men who are on our platform. That's a good predecessor to our talk. And now Michael from you and Country. I asked Michael along to help me co-convene this little chat, but I think it's going to be a very kind of bouncing in between all of us kind of a chat, my feeling is today. So Michael, you're a forest therapist. You're also running men's tables throughout New South Wales and down into ACT. And I'd love you to tell us a little bit about that, and also your forest therapy and your
absolutely.
work in Africa.
Yeah, well, I guess my entree into, I suppose, the therapeutic benefits of nature was as a mountain guide working with an outreach program in Cape Town. You know that a lot of youth sit in townships and shanties looking over a mountain that's absolutely beautiful national park that has incredible healing powers. And rather than just driving them to the mountain, which was easy enough, it's like, how do you turn up and actually really receive and be more conscious about what you learn? And so that's when my practice of diving into sort of consciously connecting, especially young people initially, and young men to their birthright, which is, a connection with nature. And my practice of, forest therapy grew from there. But more recently, I'm back in Australia and working with the regional southeast with an organisation called Men's Table, which is a really accessible way for men to come and share what's really going on in their life with a group of other 11 men in a closed circle environment. So I'm responsible for this regional southeast New South Wales, and we've got about 5-6 tables launching in December, and in between Tumbarumba, Albury, Cobargo, Badala, a lot of bushfire affected regions where men have not been turning up for any of the help that's been offered. And so we're trying to find a different way of using our formula to help men access that.
Beautiful. Thanks so much, Michael. Is that all? Yeah. It's a little overwhelming, the extent of experience in this room, in this square. And Marc, I know you've been working with sound therapy and nature work and social ecology, and, been, very much in my mind, part of the vanguard of bringing around health in our community anyway. And I'd love you to speak a little bit about yourself, and then I'm going to ask you to do what you do. But let's just hear a little bit about who you are.
Sure. So I guess first of all, with the camera in that position, can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
Fantastic. Okay. So my name is Marc Kundalini, and it's a perfect segue from Michael as well, because the nature therapy, ecotherapy, forest therapy is a big passion of mine. And I guess ultimately where I come from with the calling that I have, the offerings that I feel to share, is from a space of wanting to contribute to, I guess, the healing and the regeneration of the planet, and also the healing and the regeneration of our social fabric. And I've got a deep, deep passion for doing reconciliation work. I've been so privileged to have spent many different days and weeks hanging out with First Nations cultures, people, elders from around the world, and I'm just so passionate about sharing, contributing to that space of reconciliation. And so, yes, I work with sound therapy, sound baths. That's a part of what I work with as well. My primary calling is around helping people to reconnect with nature, because the reason, this is my take on things, and there are other people who have a similar philosophy, the reason we are in such an ecological and social mess is because it's not because we don't have the technological knowledge, it's because we've lost the relationship, we've disconnected from the living world. And the only way that we're going to find a way of restoring the balance and I guess averting the ecological crisis that's unfolding before our eyes is for as many people as possible to reconnect with nature and reconnect with each other on a human level. and reconnect with all the living creatures, all the trees, and all the what we perceive to be unliving or inanimate parts of Gaia's ecosystems. So that's, I guess, the core of what I'm really passionate about offering. There are many different modalities that I work with, ranging from Reiki to NLP, but the nature connection side of things is my deepest calling.
Thanks, Marc. And I think that for us here, with our tagline being to nourish yourself, heal the world, that just about sums it up. What we all offer as therapists is very much about creating strong, healthy ecosystems, but that can't happen on its own without the bigger ecosystem and our reciprocal interaction with that. So on that very important note, I'd love to ask Marc to just open what we're doing here. And before he does that, I'd just like to ask everybody present in this little square or out there listening to us to close their eyes and feel themselves on this earth, here and now, with the sky above, the shape of the land to the north, to the south, to the east, and to the west, with all waterways, living forests and plains and plants, and all the creatures, including ourselves and our humanity. And just allowing yourself to feel into your connection across this country. And I'd like to pay my deep respects to all those past, present, and future elders and custodians of this land who've kept this place so beautiful and in such high esteem and so alive for so long, and hope that all of us, with our work as therapists working through and under the SoulAdvisor banner, as well as elsewhere, can really, really contribute to healing this world. Thank you. Thanks, Marc.
Just going to adjust the. Thank you. I'm just going to adjust the camera for the didgeridoo. So just give me one moment. So if you could just give me a thumbs up if you can hear me now. Can you hear me now? Brilliant. Okay.
Oh, thank you so much. That's beautiful, really, really beautiful. Whew, so with that very male organ, that sounds really bad, doesn't it? That very male kind of musical instrument, it feels like we've really opened this correctly and beautifully. And I want to posit the question out there to the four of you, like, given that we talk about Mother Earth, and given that, you know, the next word is nurtured, and given that, you know, nurturing is can be seen as a really female kind of a word, what is your relationship to how you provide your, what do you call it, healing, therapy, practice? How do you talk about what you do? What's your label?
Well, I think when you look at the term nurturing, I was doing that for my son this morning. He had a bit of a reaction to a substance yesterday, vaccination, and from 9 o'clock till 2 o'clock in the morning, he was unwell. And nurturing for me is about care for and protecting. So as a parent, I happened to be the male parent, I was caring and protecting of him to help to clear his fear. One of his best friends had a side effect or to the second vaccination. And of course, in the back of his mind, he's going, Dad, well, I'm a bit scared this is going to happen to me also. So after, and he also felt vomity and stuff, but I took him like outside onto our grass to earth himself. So we both went outside 2 o'clock in the morning and we were earthing. And the context there is that the electrons from the earth help as a natural anti-inflammatory, help to calm the mind. And we were able to clear the emotional charge. He was able to purge and clear the unrest in his stomach. And we had this moment of, you know, there was that special time where just nothing else mattered in that moment. And we were able to connect at that particular point in time. And that to me is nurturing. And I do a similar thing for my clients. I'm there to assist them to clear a lot of the emotional stress that's generated based on our perceived aspect of living. And as what Michael and Marc and Richmond have been talking about also is, you know, connecting back to something. And the earth is there for everyone, freely giving its electrons out. That we forget that we're continually creating what they call ROS, reactive oxygen species, just through breathing. And we need the electrons there to help balance that out. As we're talking, I've got my earthing mat on the floor that I'm earthing to. So if you can't get onto the earth, I bring the earth into myself.
Wow, thank you. Yeah, you know what I'm hearing there is kind of like that middle role, isn't it? There's the earth with all the healing that it has to give, and you're taking your son out there and holding him and showing him how he can relate to that and come back to that sense of connection. And that's a beautiful way to explain or give an example of nurturing. Thank you. How are the rest of you feeling about the word nurturing?
I guess when I'll pick up if that's okay.
Please.
I guess traditionally, yeah, the word nurture is affiliated with the mother, isn't it? And it's and that role of life giving and suckling and being the safe haven in times of distress for children. And I guess if we look at my own upbringing, I'd say that was true. I don't think that my father necessarily had a model for himself in terms of other than through his mother. And so I guess I wonder how many of us have had models of masculinity that looks like a nurturing model. Obviously, we've seen plenty of examples in social systems in this country and around the world where masculine has been portrayed only one way, and actually a model of masculinity has not been that healthy one. It hasn't been necessarily one of reciprocity. I heard a lot of what George was talking about in his language was that reciprocal relationship between ourselves and the earth, right? That way of being, that giving and receiving way of being is so much more feminine, right? It just doesn't necessarily sit in the masculine way of being. Men did have this sort of, if I generalize, and I came from that world for a long time. I was in financial markets and very much about analysis and control and process and certainty and all this sort of stuff. And this heart space hasn't I didn't have a model for that. So I guess coming to that later in life and that reciprocal spiritual relationship, that's been new for me. And I think it's foreign for a lot of men. It's scary because it's not a space that they necessarily have had a natural pathway to. I guess so. When I think about nurturing, it's like, oh, is that the man's job? Is that my job? Yeah, actually, because but if you don't see it as part of your role and part of your way of being, then maybe we don't have a model for it. And so finding that in others and embracing that as a part of our masculine responsibility and an honoring of the feminine at the same time is really something I think is coming alive for me at the moment in this conversation.
I think, Michael, you said something to me when we were talking previously, which kind of really struck me. You said part of running your men's tables is to help men back into how they provide healing, to help them heal themselves and to heal others so that the whole burden doesn't fall on female shoulders. And that was an eye-opener.
Yeah, it's a fair point, especially in communities that have been in crisis and distress. I think a lot of men just lean really hard on their partners and don't have a way of connecting healthily with either A, other men or B, any other support in terms of modalities of support that they might offer. I've seen some great examples where, especially when trauma ticks to a certain point, it's okay, I've got permission to go and seek help now. I was down at Cabargo, they did some amazing body work. People suffered through fires and they basically set up 400 hours of free body work for people. And just to sit there and release the trauma out of the system. And Richmond, this is where, natural segue to you, you'd know so much about this. But it's like I had permission to do it, right? And maybe this is a pick up for you, Richmond. What do you think about that as an idea?
Yeah, well, one of the things that comes to mind for me is, this is a very cultural and language charged conversation, because in many other cultures and a lot of traditional cultures, things are very, very different. So, I'm really aware that certainly I would agree. My experience was, until I joined a men's group, I used to say, my 3 experiences of being in groups of men were at boarding school, which was terrifying, being in sports clubs, which was probably also almost as terrifying, and the other one was I was brought up in a Catholic church, was clergy. So none of those environments were particularly nurturing or supportive. So I think there's a huge cultural overlay, which is really relevant because it's not necessarily true in so many other cultures. I think that's a really big factor. And for me personally, the word nurturing, even just sitting here, I was sort of going, I wouldn't even think of myself in a way as a nurturer, and that's partly because a lot of my work is around empowering. It's kind of the word I would use, and it's a little bit more educative, and my work is a little bit less therapeutic, as in less dependent upon me, more looking to, not to say that's better or worse, but that's just the angle I'm tending to come from. And the other, I don't know, the image that comes to me, I think, is being a parent. Following on from what you're saying, Michael, I always had that sense of, traditionally for me, I used to talk about solar parenting, which was the idea of, the feminine being linked with the moon. I'm not saying that's true, but that's often a model. That sense of being very close to the children and being around them and coming and going and having this huge, huge impact. And I also reflect that a lot of, which I also do, and we all do that. I don't think there's male doesn't mean masculine and female doesn't mean feminine. It's important to really delineate that. And, I also had a very strong sense that there was a role for me of being like the sun, where I was just staying centered where I am and letting things evolve around and not necessarily being drawn towards. And so I used to like that model. And the older I get, the more I sort of see this, the both ends of the spectrum. Many years ago, when I was involved in some Indigenous work in New South Wales for a long period of time, and I was explained that, there's the men's business and there's the women's business, but it was also explained that at the end of life, as we get a bit older, we actually go through initiations which are beyond male and female, beyond masculine and feminine, uniting both. So I think that's a really significant impact, as we often significant points. We often come at it from that, men's work and the male thing, or the female and masculine and feminine, and yet there's, we all have these polar, this polar spectrum that we can use, and sometimes we can be really at one end, and sometimes we can sway to the other. And for me, the biggest thing is having that flexibility. So being able to nurture when nurturing is required, being able to be really directive when direction is required, and having that flexibility across the whole spectrum. That's probably, hopefully that's of some use or make some sense. And probably over to you, Marc, to hear your thoughts.
I'm in awe of the wisdom amongst this group, and just really appreciative of and gained a lot of insights from each of you. One of the things that comes to mind when I contemplate my relationship with nurturing is it's very powerfully informed by my own journey with learning to nurture myself. And through going into those vulnerable spaces, really developing a really deep sense of an ability to hold space and a deep sense of compassion. And Richmond, I appreciate very much what you're saying around having that flexibility to, I guess, move between the more, what might be perceived to be the masculine embodiments or expressions of nurturing, all the way through to the softer, gentler, more feminine aspects. So that's one of the reflections. The other point that I feel, and I bring it back to the nature connection, is through us developing this living connection with Gaia and all the living and perceived non-living systems of Gaia, and as we enter into that loving relationship where we give deep gratitude and we naturally respond to situations in life in ways where we are, I guess, champions or guardians or custodians for the earth. Through that, we learn this instinctual way of just allowing nurturing responses to flow out of us. And so that's another powerful reference experience for myself that informs my work, is the way that I relate to nature. I've learned a lot about nurturing from that relationship.
Beautiful. Thank you, Marc. Amy, who's one of our team members, has just said that she loves watching her husband with their daughter and their friends. And she said that a lot of her male friends have said to her that they're very different fathers than their fathers were. And I think, that's probably, I've heard that a million times too, like that we learned on the job and tried not to do what might have been done when our parents had their watch. I wonder how many of you feel like you've learnt on the job in the therapies that you've taken on, like we all do, of course, but have you become a different person through the process of having nurtured or empowered Richmond, sorry. Yeah, so has that made you into a different person? How has your therapy practice or being a practitioner evolved you?
Oh, I'm happy to kick off. For me, partly because the work's been around embodiment and becoming more authentically embodied and connected to self, and through that to others. My own personal development really has been the foundation of the work that I've been involved in, and making the journey ourselves as therapists. And when we're working with spontaneous involuntary movement, which is very much not a cognitive process, then there's a whole element of creating safety and compassion and nurturing at a sort of subconscious level, just through the state of the nervous system. So, without a doubt, the greatest impact of the work that I've done over the last 20 years has definitely been for myself, and then through that flowing to others. Now, I also think that's not necessarily the way that everyone has to do it, and sometimes when we're more focused on the others, then we get those flow-on effects for ourselves as well. So I think it's a two-way process, but it's been absolutely foundational. I like to think that with my ongoing development in another 20 years, I'll probably be quite a healthy, loving, kind man. Long way to go. Come a long way from where I was as a, teenager and a young man. So I just think that's fundamental to us in that modelling, and that people can feel that resonance, no matter, it doesn't matter what we know and say. That real healing and connection comes from the embodied reality inside us. So we can't really, we can write stuff and write articles and do that, but when you're face to face with people, that's a very much a felt sense, in my opinion.
I love what you've just said. I think that two-way learning process, that active reciprocity between yourself and the people that you're serving with your modality, that's healthy, that's a relationship. And I know that as a therapist for over 40 years, I was always taught I was the professional and they were the client. And so there was this very different kind of relationship, which had to go no further than that, So there wasn't a two-way flow. It was really assumed that I was the expert. And I think, in the same way that we've talked about fatherhood having changed, that you're explaining your feelings about therapy, Richmond, things might be shifting. George, how about you? You've been in it since 1985. Do you think things have changed in therapies?
I think things keep changing per se. In the context of my own development through working with clients, interestingly, the majority of my clients are women or female, and I've learned a lot from interacting with my clients from the different type of issues that they've been having. But then I've also had an underlying issue with myself in not feeling good enough at one level. And I kept studying and studying and studying. And then you realize that people really don't know at certain levels. And you're sort of driven to keep, exploring and learning. But then you start to come back into yourself and recognize there are certain things within you that you need to take on board and find peace within self. And then you learn that, there are different personality traits. We all have them. And some of them are more dominating than others, and they're shaped from our childhood, moving up through the teens into adulthood, and you're trying to balance those out as you move along with life. So it's it's just very interesting. People will be in pain and you help them to resolve their pain, because one of the things that I do a lot with is back pain or neck pain or physical pain. But then when you get rid of their pain or the pain dissipates, they're still not happy. And then you realize there are other things happening, which then took me into the emotional aspect, and then helping people with the emotional component. But even when they start to, ease up, it's always something on the outside that they're looking at trying to change. And then bit by bit, you realize it's not the stuff on the outside, it's what's happening on the inside. And something profound that I read with Viktor Frankl, he's the psychiatrist that's written the book Man's Search for Meaning, and the context within his experience of being in a concentration camp for 3 years was the only way to escape the tyranny and the inhumane environment of the camp was to go inwardly. And I think the going inwardly is a very interesting context to discuss, because it means something to different people, what it means to go inwardly. I heard another, the mystic Sadhguru also saying, you know, the only way out was in. And they're sort of talking about the same thing, but from very different scenarios. And I with my clients encourage them, well, you have a choice. You have a choice to feel good. But of course, what feeling good means is going to be very different to everyone here on the panel and people watching. But provided you've had the experience of feeling good or events that have created that, then you've got something to tune into. And I had one client that had nothing in her life that felt good, and working with her, I learned a lot, and I grew a lot from working with this particular client. So I'll stop there for the moment. So hand it over to maybe Michael or Marc.
I think, George, thank you so much. You know, like that whole thing of talking about the only way out is in, and you talking, Richmond, about, you know, the yin and the yang and the yang and the yin, that it's not male or female, it's that flow, isn't it? And the more in we go, the more capacity we have to move from that through all the options of nurturing, the yangish ones and the yinish ones. So thank you. I think next time we talk here, we're going to have to talk about the only way out is in and see what comes up for people. So Michael, sorry. Yeah. And sorry, just I need to say that it's 37 minutes past. So you might need to go.
I do. And thank you. I've really, really enjoyed this experience, Cate. So thanks for convening this space and bringing such a great group of men together. I got to say, I've got tingles. I'm feeling that there's a lot of energy still in this conversation left. We have only just scratched the surface. And I love the idea of the reciprocity piece, and that reciprocity we've got setting up. One of my work at the moment is men's tables and we say, you don't just turn up to be served, to serve, you turn up to be served. And this idea that that there's that, you can do both, and in a peer-to-peer grassroots environment, which is what we set up with Men's Table, is there's a room for therapy, and there's also room for a space where men just get to be better and more of themselves, and the different versions of what it means to be a man gets to turn up in the room. So inviting that piece, I think, Richard, with your work through Menergy, I would love to reach out and you and I have an offline conversation about this, but see how there's a lot of it where men just have to create space to be more than they have been and more of themselves. So yeah. And yeah, nice to see different bits of you men here tonight. And Cate, thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael, for turning up at short notice and being that man. I know you have to go, so bless you. Thanks for being here. Suddenly you're all bigger. Right. It has been 38 coming up to 39 minutes, and I feel like there's so much more that we could talk about here, but we're not going to stop. So we're going to continue to run these SoulAdvisor Global Collective meetings, and hope to invite all three of you back again to say more wise things, because you've really made me think a lot, and I'm sure you've made everybody else think too. The comments are outrageous. Can you see the comments, you guys?
Oh yeah.
Are you watching?
Yep.
Oh, you can't. Oh, you can, Richmond, but you can't, Marc?
Yeah.
No?
Oh, I haven't been looking at them yet.
Oh, okay. Well, hopefully we'll be able to save them all for you to look at, or maybe Tanya out there, you could somehow save them, because they're really, really precious. And there's a lot of deep thanks and gratitude for being taken on a deep journey with this this talk. We don't hear enough from the men in our culture. We really don't. And we're all in this together. So thank you so much for being here today. And thank you, Marc, for your beautiful Didge work and taking us down. That was just beautiful. Thank you, Richmond, for being all that you are out there and doing all you do, and can't wait one day to study with you. I'm just trying to create a bit of space. SoulAdvisor is very busy. And George, amazing that you should come on at such short notice to such an unknown group of people and express yourself so deeply and so beautifully. So really appreciate you all being here. And thank you. Bless you.
Thank
And
you,
I'll work out how to end this broadcast. And thanks to everybody who came along to listen in. Cheers. See you
Thanks,
soon.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Cate. Bye-bye. Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.